This recording is made possible with the support of the Collectors Admiralty. This recording is made with the permission of the original author. All rights and intellectual properties are truly acknowledged. For more information about the book in question or the Collectors Admiralty, please visit the description box below. Cosmic Delirium by Ahmed Farooq. Chapter 3. Awakened within the mouth of eternal darkness, confused, shuddering, and completely unaware of her surroundings, Eleanor felt as cold as the eldritch sensation of dread possessed her. It was hard figuring out anything as nothing could even be seen. Darkness had enshrouded her and had obscured all vision and blotted out hope. She stood there frozen, whispered to herself prayers, hymns, and songs of hope to kill the ever-growing fear. Motionless, maddened by the stillness and melancholic bleakness, the poor figure shrieked as nothing else could be done. She felt a distant disturbance, heard a rumble at closer distance, followed by a grotesque hiss. "Father?" she mumbled. "Mother?" Yet there came no response. She stood there trembling in the infinite darkness as she felt a sudden chill grip her, causing her to shiver. She felt cold hands clutching her shoulder and a menacing grin whispering and hissing in her ear. Her heart pounded hard against her rib cage as fear rummaged her senses. The cold, silent hiss spoke to her as the grip tightened around her shoulders and menacingly reached down to her bosom. "I smell fear," it spoke. "You reek of fear. Ha! Fear me not, O child. O dear, feeble child, fear me not." Eleanor cried hysterically as the cold arms started to coil around her, suffocating her and softly hurtling her into the grim realm of fear, the conqueror of hearts. Eleanor shrunk, trembling in fear. She felt it looking at her and smile. She could still feel it sniffing her, gripping her tightly with its many arms and hissing menacingly. She could feel it embrace, enshrouding her as it reached her pale face. "You do not seem to fight back," it whispered. "Fear has gotten the best of you." Fear! Oh, how I love the rancid reek of decay of hope. Oh, how blissful is the grim putrefaction of dead courage. She could feel it coiling around her until it reached her head. It shrouded her and soon raced across the empty darkness, thrashing its troubled passenger along. Eleanor grew dizzy and felt a strong sensation of nausea. All she could tell was that she was being dragged around the endless unknown, shrouded by the grotesque embrace of the bizarre host. Soon the fiend came to a halt, and the formless darkness unfurled. Light poured in. Eleanor found herself under the shade of a colossal megalith in a deeper, denser forest, bathing in the eternal sunlit glow. Before her lay formless, sourceless shadow, curling up and twisting in the greener patches of grass and grinning at the fair girl with a sharp pair of glimmering white teeth. Eleanor shrieked as she tried to walk away, but in all directions she saw nothing but trees. She shrunk below the megalith, trembling as she shuddered at the sight of the fearsome monstrosity and its inhumane form. Terror beyond comprehension possessed her, and she bore witness to a spectacle so lurid. It curled and twisted towards Eleanor, and slowly wrapped itself around her legs, menacingly grew up to her neck, and abruptly reached up to her ears. Fear is futile, it hissed once more. Though mortal fear intoxicates me, my intention is not cruel as I urge it to be. Your cowardice will not be your savior. You are weak, I can sense it. Eleanor gulped as she turned her head towards the grim menace. Cold sweat trickled down her forehead, and she shivered as she dreaded its mere presence. Seize hold of your emotions. They will be your only downfall. You must depart soon from this dreary shrine and reach the destination afar. I no longer choose to feed upon your fear, for there is a far greater threat that lurks ahead. Who, who are you? Eleanor stammered, but still cold in shock. What you speak of? Me? I am darkness, the creator, the destroyer, the eternal, the finite, the grim nothingness that devours and gives birth to everything and yet slowly consumes it to nothingness. I am the ethereal, formless shadow, an epitaph to life, a part of a distant race of life givers and makers of magic. My name beyond human comprehension, my age is greater than the span of mortal existence. Yet I will speak no more. Look at me. You gaze into the infinite hollow emptiness. I choose to guide you to the mistress, the maiden that awaits. Pay homage to the shrine and we depart. The squalid bounty, her tengri, will soon arrive. He lusts for your blood and he seeks your head for a fair price he has bargained for. The cult of the grey shamans is on the hunt and wants you dead. The rancor news and the surreal events stung her as they buzzed around in her head, evoking chaos and an outburst of dead hopes and sullen emotions. She felt the shadowy fiend let loose of her and saw it curl towards the megalith. She saw it pointing towards the colossal ruin and hissing at her to pay homage to it. She walked towards, limping in fear, shuddering greatly that she had lost balance. She felt she fell at its base, and to her astonishment bore witness to the lurid carvings engraved upon it, followed by the incomprehensible hieroglyphs that followed each bizarre image. She placed her hand upon the megalith, shut her eyes, and placed one hand upon her chest. She felt the acrimonious hissing once more. The fiend chanted to her the Lorior, the hymn of the holy, and indicated to her the recitations and prayers for the long dying race of shadows and for the chants of the rise of the young shaman, the Lady of the Lotus, the fair mistress, the awaited maiden. Eleanor would Eleanor would repeat the chants with its distant hissing, softly moving her trembling lips, fearing wrong pronunciations as she feared the grim nature of her host. She kept her eyes shut and her hands on the cold megalith. She still echoing the chants along with the grim shadow. She dared not move and became motionless as the tall megalith itself, for fear had consumed her, and the wit to question and struggle had long died. Soon the acrid whispers died, and the cold sensation of the creature's presence faded. Eleanor slowly opened her eyes and looked in all directions as she felt her fear softly die away. Silently yet softly, she turned her head around, and alas, it could no longer be seen around her. The fiend had vanished. Eleanor sighed as she removed her hands from the megalith and backed away. She decided to flee the forest, for she failed to trust the speck of darkness. She sought for the nearest path that led away from the circle of trees, but failed in doing so. She could not find a way out from the melancholic heart of the forest. She could not distance herself from the macabre megalith monstrosity. She curled up underneath the treacherous shrine itself, gazed up at the purple sky, and looked at it as darkness consumed it. She closed her eyes as sleep conquered her, and alas, she fell asleep at the feet of the grimace of the young shaman and shadow creatures she was asked to pay homage to. Violently jolted to and fro, and hearing her name being called out loud with a certain tone of panic within the voice, she awakened. Her mother's face ran pale in panic. Eleanor could smell burnt buildings. The distant alarms and sirens poured into her ears, followed by panic-stricken cry of the crowd. Eleanor, her mother hugged her hard. You are okay. Oh, thank God. What happened, mother? Eleanor questioned her mother, rubbing her eyes. And what's with the sirens outside? Oh, my dear child, did you not see it? Were you asleep even when it happened? What happened, Mom? A meteor burst in midair. The explosion was vast, but the shock wave was minor. But it still rattled our house, and most of our windows broke. Fortunately, you were not wounded. Eleanor could see that the windows of her room lay shattered upon the floor. Eleanor's mother pulled her up and informed her, Eleanor, we are moving. This town is cursed. Nothing but destruction and death happens here these days. Healthy children dying of comas, super bodies exploding in the air, meteors scarring the land like they scarred the moon. I say those comas and deaths might be related to the radiation from the meteors. Mom, but where are we going to move to? We move to another city. Pack up because we will shift tomorrow. Your father will get us away from here in no time. There was something queer about the happenings, as if the apocalypse had dawned upon the world. Meteor showers, mid-air explosions of superbolides, teenagers fallen into comas, and then later on be ushered into the grim realms of death. Why was there a sudden outburst of calamities? Was God bothered or deeply disturbed, or was there a disturbance at a smaller, not so divine but a cosmic scale? Grim circumstances and never-ending obituary reports in the newspaper had brought Al-Muallim to her mind. The thought of his death dawned upon her, and she shuddered. Though he was of no interest to her, but she could vaguely recall unseen and unknown events. Events from her past dreams, maybe. It was within such dreams, she recalled, squinting, that Al-Muallim had something to do with the catastrophe. He had the trigger. He was the trigger, and his death would somehow mean that something more treacherous would follow. She squinted her eyes more, concentrating harder upon the vague reflections of some odd memory. Soon the shadow monster, nothingness, the empty self-proclaimed God came to her mind. Then there was yet another obscure vision, a fair blonde maiden seated upon a lotus. It was her who spoke of Al-Muallim. She could hear her speaking out his name, but she could not recall the words that followed. She tried harder, recalling the events, but nothing else came back to her. Alas, once more lost within the dim realms of melancholy. where unanswered questions grew upon the jet black remains of burnt trees, where the blissful sun was too afraid to shine, where all was uncertain, and where the unclear lines between the fabrics of fate and reality were obscured by the fantasies and illusions of the dreamer who chose to ponder within the gloomy realms of melancholy. It was within these realms Eleanor took refuge when she felt uncertain and afraid. It was the realm bound by time. It was where the shackles of time would get so tight that they would bruise the skin, hence bruising the wrists and ankles. Eleanor walked out of her room, feeling faint, and she walked downstairs to where her mother was. She sat beside her and helped her pick up the luggage. End of chapter 3.